roll through.
Too many to mention the old show business cliche, but no, that sounds fantastic. So you came back to Australia after your degree?
I came back briefly and then
Mm.
left again. I came back from Cambridge and did a clerkship at a law firm
Hmm.
and finished my law degree, and then immediately on finishing, more or less, left for New York,
A lawyer's funny, or is it case by case?
case by case.
I guess some of them are really amusing and others not so much. But has being a lawyer affected your comedy? And when I say comedy, I mean comedy.
Only so far as it shows me the alternative.
You know, the day job as opposed to a showbiz job.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, it's an industry that's based on a lot of very clever people doing jobs that are, for the main, fairly menial.
Hmm.
Um, just growing up and going through school and university, people tell you that if you're good with words, you should be a lawyer, because it's one of the only reliable industries where being good with words is the prerequisite. But it's not. It's necessary but not sufficient to be good at law. You need also to be really mechanically minded, very precise, very diligent, very careful, willing to turn your mind to something that might not be very interesting and just put all your attention on finding a phrase or figuring out the structure of an 800-page document and how all of the clauses will change if you change one clause.
Hmm.
So it's not
Gosh.
my bag.
Not your bag, not mine either, unfortunately. But you know, hey, shout out to the lawyers. They do a heck of a job at what they're doing there. So we
The reason they get paid so much is because nobody else will do what they do for any less
yes,
money.
sounds incredibly tedious. But then, so are lots of day jobs. So, why did you decide to go over to New York, or what took you over to the States?
I did an internship with the Swiss bank there, the
Mm.
UBS, and I basically did that in order to get over there, get a visa, and it wasn't fun. Um, it was, being paid $400 a fortnight to
Mm.
work long hours and have a
Gosh.
90-minute commute, and I didn't enjoy the industry, and my boss wasn't very nice,
No.
and
How did you survive on that sort of money? Sorry to stop you, but that doesn't sound like a surviving in New York amount of cash.
I shared a room with two other girls,
Mm.
and they subsidised our accommodation,
Oh, okay.
but it was not a lot of money, no.
Yeah, yeah. Just on the little I know about living in New York. Where were you living?
New Jersey, I was
Oh, you
living.
lived in Jersey, so you commuted.
I commuted to Connecticut most days, so
Oh, right, okay, gosh.
through, and then I'd
What are we
come
looking at there? A couple of hours? Oh, you said 90 minutes.
hour and a
didn't
half,
you?
yeah.
Wow, well, that tested your mettle, Alice.
Melted my metal,
But I bet
destroyed
you're
me.
glad you done it in a way.
No, no, I think that's a false rhetoric that people say. I'm glad I went to New York, but I don't think I did it in the right way, and I think it was a mistake the way I did it.
I'm sorry to laugh, but you know I love when people just make abrupt statements to the
No.
contrary of what I was thinking. Just makes me laugh. So, how did we want? Obviously, you were looking for an escape, and you weren't going to be so close to New York and not take in some of the comedy scene, right?
Well, I was doing comedy from the day I arrived. It
Mm.
became unsustainable with my banking job, and so I quit that and just hung out and was basically homeless, living on people's couches and house sitting and doing stand-up.
Wow. What sort of clubs were you performing at?
Oh, wherever they'd take me. There is the division between mainstream and alternative comedy. There are a lot of really good rooms in Brooklyn which put what I would call comedy and what they call alternative comedy. And then you have the mainstream rooms where they'll let you on stage if you're decent, but they want you to bring people and they want you to sell tickets, and that's its own game.
Mm.
And worth doing,
Yeah.
certainly. But by the time my visa ran out, I was ready to go home.
Definitely, you'd done that. And do you feel you got a good feel for what it's like being a New Yorker, or being an artist in that area, and how you might climb the greasy rope or pole or ladder, anything greased?
Yeah, look, it's not a place to be poor.
I've picked that up. Yeah.
It's not a good. I mean, in America more than anywhere else in the world, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
It's very, very meritocratic in that way. You do get what you pay for. If you pay a lot of money, you'll have a very good life. But if you don't have much money, life is difficult.
And do you think that's a big? Even Sydney is a very expensive place to live, but do you feel New York is a lot worse?
Sydney is an expensive place to live, but many lovely things are not expensive. So you can go to the beach, or you can hang out in the park, or you can have a picnic, and the food is fresh and cheap. I mean, restaurants or accommodation might be more expensive overall, but you can go into a shop and buy an apple and it won't taste like cardboard. When I was in New York, the only place you could buy an apple that didn't taste like just water that had been in deep freeze for 3 years was the Whole Foods, and so you'd have to be willing to pay $2 for an apple or $3 for an apple just to get fresh food. And so although you could get food, you could get a cheap burger for $1, it's not edible, or not what, we're spoiled in Australia. We have access to good meat and good vegetables, and that's just astonishing. I mean, before I went, I didn't eat any meat while I was in New York. I tend not to eat much meat anyway, but just because you look at their factory farming protocols, they're appalling the way that they produce food. It's so unwholesome. And so, yeah, sure, you can eat that cheap food cheaply, but it's not a good way to live.
No, I've heard that the food is plentiful and cheap, but now I've heard something else and also not good. So I'm collating these facts all the time for when I get over there. So I'll increase my budget for apples and stuff like that, because, gosh, I love a good apple, Alice. I really, really do. And I'm not even joking. So how do you think your time in New York has affected your comedy?
I have a better sense of the difference in audiences. It was an experiment in figuring out how to play to different audiences, because if you go in New York, you have a completely different audience from if you go to one of the Midwest colleges and do one of those gigs out there, or if you're in Brooklyn, it's a completely different audience, or if you're one of the urban clubs, you have to behave in a completely different way. And it's given me more confidence in the things that stay the same for me when I'm on stage, the thing that I think is central to my performance and what I am as an artist. And also the things that I need to change or need to adapt, or things that need to be flexible if you're going to actually get an audience on board.
Yeah, really interesting. Wow, you've been around. And there's so back to Australia. Any other towns or cities you've lived in Australia that you want to give a shout out to?
No, I've unfortunately travelled more overseas than I have in Australia. I like Melbourne, I like Brisbane, I like Perth is great, I like Adelaide. I haven't performed in Tasmania, but I hear it's good. I've never lived anywhere in Australia but Sydney.
It's the apple aisle. You're going to get a good apple down there.
Oh, I like a good apple.
we share that. We'll have to meet up for an apple and a coffee. So Sydney, is that going to be home, or you've got some plans to go abroad and live again?
Look, I'll go where the job takes me. It's one of the things that you can do with this job. I would go back to America, but I wouldn't go back poor. I'd go back to England. If I could get the visa and all that stuff lined up. At the moment, I'm happy in Sydney, and I feel like I'm learning enough and doing well enough and still getting skills. So throwing myself out of this into something else is not useful now.
Yeah.
There's no point in just going somewhere else to be somewhere else. There are enough opportunities coming up in Sydney at the moment that I am happy to see where they lead.
And your Sydney Comedy Festival has just wrapped up. I was going to say, do you want to give it a score out of 10? But that's not for you to do. But did you enjoy it? Was it a great experience?
It was a lovely experience. I was nominated for Best Newcomer, which was a great compliment.
Congratulations, you.
And I was the only one who was an independent artist who was nominated in any of the categories, which is special.
Yeah, definitely.
Made me feel like even though I didn't win, I sort of won. So that was nice.
Fantastic. And what's coming up next?
I'm working for a satirical news program called News Lab. I write for Irrational Fear. I'm going to Canberra next week, Brisbane the week after, and Melbourne the week after that. So lots of things. So
to plug, where do we want to go to keep up with all the Alice Fraser news?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter. I tweet at alliterative, ALITERATIVE, or I'm on alicecomedyfraser.com.
AliceComedyFraser.com. That sounds like a good place to catch up. Well, Alice Fraser, thanks very much for telling us about all the places you've lived and how they've affected your work. It's been really, really interesting.
Thanks so much, Dan.
I bet everyone else has enjoyed it too. Someone's doing some work in your apartment building or house. There's some drilling and hammering. But,
authenticity.
Hey, look, life continues to go on, doesn't it?
It does.
We can't stop life just because we want to have an interview. Thank you very much, Alice.
Thanks for having me. Bye.